everyone. How are you? Welcome to today's webinar. The webinar is being hosted by Energy and Utilities in partnership with Women in Renewable Energy, WIRE, Global Women's Network for the Energy Transition, and Women in Clean Energy. Welcome to everyone, our distinguished guests, our panelists. We're very, very excited to be here. Before we jump into this dynamic conversation, I'd like to introduce you our panelists. Today we have Shada Altay. She's with the committee member of Young Professionals Network Energy Institute. Shada is a committee member of the Energy Institute's Young Professionals Network, YPN, in the Middle East. Her efforts are mostly focused on building a platform for young professionals in the energy sector and supporting them along their professional journey. Shada is also an assistant manager in EY's Climate Change and Sustainability Services, CCASS, team in Dubai. She offers her technical expertise for projects dealing with energy management, carbon footprints, emission reduction strategies, and sustainability advisory. She has also played pivotal roles in developing an automated inventory reporting systems for GCC countries and in developing emission reduction strategies and energy management systems for major utilities in the region. Welcome, Shada, and we're looking forward to having a discussion with you. Our next guest is Miss Mary Main Garcia. She's a partner at Denton's. Mary Main Garcia is vice chair of the board of the Clean Energy Business Council. A practicing lawyer, Mary is a partner in the energy and infrastructure team of international law firm Denton's, specializing in energy and infrastructure projects, advising on project development and M&A in the energy and infrastructure sectors. She advises sponsors, lenders, contractors, and public sector clients in numerous jurisdictions across the Middle East, Africa, Asia, and Europe. Mary has a passion for renewables and clean energy. She focuses in particular on advising on corporate and commercial aspects of renewables projects, including solar, PV, and CSP, as well as distributed solar, wind, and waste energy, in addition to advising on conventional power, water, wastewater, and district cooling projects. Thank you very much, Mary, and welcome. And our last guest, but not least, is Miss Christine Lynch. Christine Lynch has co-founded GWNet, the Global Women's Network for the Energy Transition, which aims at empowering women in the sustainable energy sector. She founded her own company to advance a global energy transition with renewable energy and energy efficiency. In addition to this, she is a member of the board of directors of the International Solar Energy Society, ISES. Christine has more than 20 years experience in the field of renewable energy resources. From 2011 until last year, she has worked as executive secretary of the Renewable Energy Policy Network of the 21st Century, REN 21, at the United Nations Environment Program in Paris. Prior to this, she has served as Secretary General of the European Renewable Energy Council. She has also worked in a regional energy agency in Austria, promoting energy efficiency and renewable energy sources. Christine holds a master's degree in international economics and applied languages. Thank you very much to all. Welcome to all of you. My name is Joanna Osawe. I am the president and CEO of WIRE, Women in Renewable Energy. Our mission and vision is very simple. It is to advance the role and recognition of women in the energy sector. So what are we doing? What are we doing this morning or today? We're going to talk about the energy sector, which remains one of the least gender diverse sectors, and closing this gender gap will be vital as women are key drivers of innovative and inclusive solutions. A clean energy transition will require innovative solutions and business models to be adopted and greater participation from a diverse talent pool. Across the energy sector, women make up less than 30% of the workforce, but that is changing as more young women enter the sector and as the industry makes a concentrated effort to increase gender diversity. The global focus on attracting more women into the energy industry is not just about creating a more diverse workforce. It is of vital importance if we are to continue to serve the world's growing energy needs. With demand for engineering, expertise far outstripping supply, and half the experienced engineering workforce set to retire in the next decade, the sector is facing a crippling skill shortage. In order to power the future energy projects, the industry must act now to fully tap into this enormous potential talent pool. So some of the questions that we're going to talk about is the industry really less attractive? Our vital role that women will play in the energy transition globally? How can we attract the younger generation and involve them in STEM? What about creating recruitment techniques that makes the industry attractive for women? And can we establish women in energy to play a role of a mentor for the upcoming generation and maintaining diversity and inclusion with the industry in order to attract the wider available talent pool? So we'll start with Mary, perhaps giving us a 5 to 7 minutes overview regarding some of this webinar, and we'll go into the other ladies as well. So thank you very much, Mary. Welcome. It's great to see you, and it's great to have you.
Thank you very much for having me indeed, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to do a brief canter through some of the issues around the gender gap in the energy sector. And Joanna already touched on some of the statistics there that we see. And in my view, I think that the clean and the renewable energy sector in particular provides an opportunity for women because there's already greater participation of women in those areas of the energy sector than in conventional energy. Just to take a step back, although women make up just shy of half of the global workforce, according to the latest statistics that we've seen from IRENA on renewable energy and jobs, it's a report that they publish each year, those statistics currently show that women make up 22% of the workforce in conventional energy and 32% in renewables. So clearly a lot needs to be done generally in terms of women's participation in the energy sector. Specifically, I think there's more opportunity perhaps in relation to renewables, but there's still a big gender gap sitting there. The energy sector has the ability to provide employment opportunities for women across the entire value chain. And I think that's something we have to bear in mind. It's from engineers, scientists, contractors, developers, consultants, managers, bankers, lawyers, administrators, and so on. But that gender gap, and particularly, I think the growing renewable energy sector, there's an opportunity to close that gap and to promote gender balance and to tackle some of the ingrained stereotypes, particularly in relation to some of those areas that I mentioned in relation to engineers, scientists, managers, and so on. At that level in particular, I think the gap gets even broader. And governments across the globe, yes, we've seen them prioritise in particular renewable energy development, and I think that's quite important here as well when we're looking at that gender gap being closed more in terms of renewables. And they've done that primarily, of course, to reduce emissions, meet international obligations in relation to climate change, but also I think to reap the socio-economic benefits of that. And one of the things I think that is very important is that socio-economic benefits also exist in relation to the participation of women in the energy sector. And I think that's very clear. We've seen that the participation of women at all levels, participation of women on boards and so on, whether it's energy sector or not, is beneficial to business. And I think the socio-economic benefits are even greater. I'd like to just touch very briefly as well on the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs as they're known, because that's also central to the role of promoting women in the sector. So in 2015, world leaders committed to a number of SDGs, including SDG 5 and SDG 7. And SDG 5, I think, is the most pertinent for today's discussion, and that's to achieve gender equality and to empower all women and girls by 2030. And it's based on gender equality, and it says that it's not only a fundamental human right, but it's a foundation that's necessary for a peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable world, which is obviously something we'd all like to see. I think the gender equality goal by 2030, of course, is very ambitious, and that requires commitments not just from governments that have signed up to this, but also the industry and energy stakeholders generally. And I think we all owe it, and it's incumbent on ourselves to aim towards that goal and to implement actions that will accelerate the participation of women in the energy sector generally. I mentioned also SDG 7, so that was SDG 5. SDG 7 is in relation to providing access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern and clean energy. And that, of course, is sort of tied in with. I mentioned that I advise on a lot of projects, but I'm also in my role in the Clean Energy Business Council, very focused on clean energy. So SDG 7 as well, for me, coupled with SDG 5, are extremely important and really combine together, I think, to promote the role of women in the clean energy sector in particular. And we all know that energy is one of the dominant contributors to climate change. It represents more than 60% of greenhouse gas emissions. So I think that when you couple it with SDG 5, really shows that gender equality and clean energy are at the heart of the need to increase the participation of women in the energy sector and the opportunity to drive forward at the same time the clean energy sector within that. But I think it's very clear for all of us that gender equality in the energy sector and the energy industry itself, as I said, it needs to have participation from all stakeholders. And we really need to strive towards increasing the participation of women in the sector at all levels, and to ensure that there's retention and promotion of women in the sector. And we need to try and sort of eliminate a lot of the gender stereotypes and cultural biases. These all need to be tackled, and I'm sure throughout this session we'll be talking a bit more about those. Just before I stop, I'd just like to touch very briefly on Women in Clean Energy. That's part of the Clean Energy Business Council, and it's a forum for women in the clean energy sector in the Middle East and North Africa. And it's really to provide a network for women, professional women within the clean and renewable energy fields. We organise training, technical training, as well as general networking sessions. We aim to promote career progression and to encourage women to attend industry events. And we also run a mentoring program as well for lower to mid-level women in the sector. And finally, at the moment, we're running a podcast series for women in the sector and also operate an intern program. So if anyone's interested in learning more about women in clean energy, then please feel free to obviously get in contact. Last but no means least, of course, is the impact of COVID-19. And I think one of the things that I've done again is sort of strived or emphasized the need for economic and social change. And of course, I think the discussion that we're having today is also central to that economic and social change, it's incumbent on all of us to promote the role of women in the energy sector. Thank you, Joanna.
Thank you very much. Very well said. In Canada, we have a campaign called Equal by 30. And I know that Clean Energy Business Council and Whites as well has signed. And it's a commitment also for women empowerment. So it's equal opportunity, equal pay, and equal leadership for women by 2030. I invite anyone to also look at the Equal by 30 campaign. I can definitely put you in touch with some of the folks that are running this program. And we're, of course, very, very proud to be partnered with CBC and Whites Women in Clean Energy. Fantastic group. So, Mary, thank you very much. We'll move on to Christine. Christine, it's lovely to see you and welcome to the webinar.
Thank you, Joanna. Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. I'm going to just share a couple of slides with you. There we go. To take you through my remarks that are kind of building upon what Mary just said. GWNet, the Global Women's Network for the Energy Transition, was created in 2017 because some of us realized that there are not many women out there, and that by putting the women working in this space together, we believe that the energy transition would advance more quickly and also more equitably. We are doing different, similar to what Mary has described, different activities. Networking is moved more and more to the virtual space. We are working on data because if there is not enough data out there, then it's very difficult for policymakers to take up the issues. We run a series of different mentoring programs, And we have also launched a platform for women in energy experts because we're a bit sick and tired of conference organizers always claiming that there are not enough qualified experts, women experts out there. So we just want to have created a place where we show all the expertise that is existing. Here, a series of our mentoring programs. We have been doing one for Latin American countries and Middle East, North Africa, together with the German government and their energy partnership programs. At the moment, we are having one on women in energy storage together with the World Bank ESTMAP, and one for women in energy access with SE for All, and we are about to launch a new one for women in clean cooking together with SE for All and the Clean Cooking Alliance. So we have heard already that the energy transition is a multidimensional, complex, non-linear, non-deterministic, and highly open process. It radically reforms the existing energy supply and demand systems, and it simply goes beyond replacing fossil to clean sources. What is needed is a change in consumption, distribution, and investment patterns. We need new coalitions, new capabilities of actors, and also new sets of policy, regulation, and also mindsets. So it requires behavior change, innovation, integration across all sectors. For this, we need a diverse set of backgrounds, capabilities, and perspectives, and we will need a large and diverse $2 million in 2050. So clearly a huge potential, and this industry will only thrive if we manage to attract the best talents from both men and women. This is what we are absolutely convinced about. And when we have the statistic of 32% in mind, which is the current share of women in renewable energy, where very clearly when we look at STEM jobs, it's even lower, then there is a clear need for pushing and promoting women on the one hand who are in the sector, and also attracting new women to a clearly vibrant and very interesting industry. There are a series of policies and solutions on how women's participation in the sector can be increased. They go from mainstreaming gender perspectives to creating networks and supporting programs such as mentorship, access to education and training. And then it also goes, of course, for gender targets and quotas. We need workplace policies and regulations. And last but not least, work-life balance is something which is important, and where companies really can play a role in offering these. GWNet has earlier this year launched a study where we looked at all the literatures out there and then interviewed people from the industry. And it's evident, and there are lots of studies out there showing, not only in the energy sector, but in general, that they show the power of gender equality, and they show that improving or reaching gender equality would significantly improve global GDP. And we see that companies with diverse leadership have much better results. They are better prepared to survive financial shock. They have more innovation, investment in R&D. They have decreased risk and overconfidence. And they have also increased action on environmental issues. And I'm sure that we are soon going to see they will also be better prepared to challenges such as the current COVID-19 pandemic that we are all facing. So it's not only human right for women to have the same access to employment than men, but we also see that it's actually an economic benefit. And I think this is really a crucial argument. In this study, Women for Sustainable Energy, Strategies to Foster Women's Talents for Transformational Change, we have gathered all the evidence and we have also listed best practice examples from the industry, but also from policy and regulation for diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And it's really a nice compendium that is available free of charge from our website. And I can only invite you, if you're interested, to have a look on this. We also started with a campaign on promoting women entrepreneurs, because we see that there are lots of capable women, remarkable women entrepreneurs in sustainable energy who are working across different disciplines and countries. And we want to give these women visibility and inspire thereby others and encourage others to follow suit. So also on our website, you can find a video series of interviews and also a compendium of information containing global, regional, and national resources for entrepreneurs. Is really about to inspire other women in this space. And I'll stop there. The hint for our Women in Energy expert platform, which in the meantime has more than 1,300 members from over 100 countries, where we want to give women working in this sector the visibility and also provide them with the possibility to interconnect and to exchange with each other about their work. That's it from me for the start in a nutshell. Back to you, Joanna.
Thank you very much, Christine. That's extremely informative. I really enjoyed the quote that you had on your presentation. When more women join the workforce, everyone benefits. And it's Christine Lagarde, ECB president, that quoted that. I could not agree with you more about how often I get approached about not having enough women on panels. And while we are here, we definitely are panelists, and there's definitely plenty of women, you know, that we can definitely make sure that we're highlighting. So thank you very, very much again for this. We'll move on to Shada next.
Thank you, Joanna. And thank you to Mary and Christine for all your inputs. I'll say a few words today on this topic from my perspective as a woman in energy, but also as a young professional who is trying to support others in the industry as well. So as we all know, and as we've heard earlier from the other panelists, the energy sector is continuously evolving. And that's due to emerging technologies, policies and regulations, economic challenges, and of course, more recently, as we just heard, the threat of the pandemic. And I think that has really changed the way that we do business. And these changes are driving a lot of new innovation in the sector, but also attracting new talent. And that new talent can be in terms of young people who are getting more interested and more engaged in the energy sector, but also more women who are engaging in conversations and also driving and spearheading some of the change initiatives and some of the innovative solutions that we're seeing in the market. And I think that this really comes at a time when governments, organizations, and teams are realizing some of the value of having more diversity and inclusiveness, and some of the positive impacts that they can have on their workforce in general. And I mean, just to kind of, I wouldn't want to iterate some of the statistics that we saw, but I think we can all agree that every year we're seeing a slight improvement in the number of women on executive boards, women in senior positions or positions of middle management and so on. And we can really know that now more women are being heard. And as Joanna just mentioned, it's getting easier to get female-led discussions and get panels of women and so on, just like we're having one today. But more importantly, I think we're seeing more female role models, and we're seeing more male sponsors. And they're both trying to promote more diversity and inclusiveness in their teams, but also really championing the empowerment of women, of young people, and other groups that don't fall within that typical stereotype of an energy leader. And I think we're seeing these changes on a global scale, but also closer to home here in the Middle East as well. And as we all know, today's young professionals, both men and women, will grow to be tomorrow's leaders that really shape the energy sector. I'm currently working with the Energy Institute to provide a platform for young professionals especially those who would like to engage on big discussions around the energy sector, whether that's in relation to climate change, energy access, and energy security. And I'm also working with my fellow committee members in bringing this together under the umbrella of the Young Professionals Network that's part of the Energy Institute. But the Energy Institute also has strong ties to Powerful Women Initiative. And that initiative basically aims to advance gender diversity and promote the role of women across the top ranks of the energy sector. They do that by campaigning and reporting on relevant matters, and as well as providing support to aspiring women, whether that's in terms of networking opportunities, mentoring programs, and so on. They also provide a lot of practical advice and good guidance on diversity and inclusiveness. But basically, my big idea here today is that by encouraging more women leaders and young professionals to stay true to their values, to lead with their strengths, and to embrace change, we're really building a more resilient future for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You're doing wonderful things. Every single organization out there is really trying to promote and champion and sponsor really, the women and inclusivity. I'm definitely a huge proponent of gender diversity and inclusion. So thank you again, Shada, for this. Christine, we're going to go to you. Would you mind talking to us a little bit about your challenges in your career?
Well, I've started to work in the sustainable energy field right after my university studies. I graduated in 1996. So in the 90s, this sector was not as hype as it is today. It was really a sector of more the environmentally concerned people. And many of, I have an economics background with a specialization in marketing, and many of my fellow students went to the big international groups. And when I talked to them that I started my career in a regional energy agency here in Austria, and they looked a bit surprised and said, "Biomass, what is this?" So, it was not that fashionable back then to go into that industry. I have to say, I have never regretted it. It was also a bit challenging from a personal background because from my family history, my father is an engineer, and he used to work for now he's retired, but he used to work for the utility designing coal-fired power plants. And when I started to work in the renewables field, he said to me literally, I should look for a proper job. Because back then renewables were not really regarded as a real field of business. And I can say that my father is quite proud of his daughter who has made a career in this field. And the two coal-fired power plants that he designed, they are shut down in the meantime. So they were built and now they're shut down because Austria has moved out of coal completely. So I think what is important in any field is that really you are convinced about what you do. I think you're only good at doing when you like what you're doing. And I have the privilege that through my entire career, I found the sector I really believe in and I love working in. And I think this is a big plus because you spend lots of hours at job and sometimes you spend more hours at work than you spend at home. And so I think it's important that you really like what you're doing. And sometimes, yes, indeed, it takes courage. I remember in the late 90s, I went to a conference which was on energy efficiency, and it was in the western part of Austria. And back then it was maybe attended by 100, 120 people. I can tell you I was the only woman. So there were 119 men and me, which was a bit intimidating, I have to say. I was a young graduate and looking at all these mainly men in gray suits around me was just not super inspiring. And luckily, as some of you have already mentioned, this has changed. So I've never been back in a situation where I was the only woman. I might have been the only woman at the panel for several times, but in a whole conference room, luckily the picture has become a bit more colorful. And so I think it's important also not to be intimidated because I mean, in German we have a saying that people they cook with water, meaning it's you just have to go for it if you really want to do it. And then I think what is also important is to find mentors, and these can be men or women. I had fantastic men supporting me in my career. And of course, I think it's also important, and I have heard this often from younger women, that they lack role models. I think it's important to have role models in any industry because they provide inspiration on how you can go about certain things. But in general, I can only recommend the sustainable energy sector to anybody, because I really think it's and I have witnessed this growth of an industry from an infant stage to a multi-billion-dollar industry. So that was really very, very interesting to see. And back then, when I started, it was a phenomenon that was only happening in OECD countries. And what I find really encouraging and super interesting is that this has been, renewable energy is now a global phenomenon. It's especially countries in the emerging economies and the developing countries that have an increased demand for new energy generating capacities. They nowadays invest in renewables and clean energy. And I think that makes me really optimistic that the best in this sector is yet to come. So anybody who feels the call should definitely not be discouraged by a bit more men in this field. I think this will change, and that's what we are all here for, to work that the share of women is increasing in this field.
Thank you very much for that, Christine. You know, I actually had a very similar experience when I first started in the sector. It was my first conference ever in the renewable sector, and there's 300 people, and there's 5 women, including myself. So I definitely have been where you have been as well. And I really, you know, the way I look at, you know, my career as well in the renewable sector, it's a very passionate industry. And I don't look at it as a job nor a career, but more of a lifestyle. And I'm very, very happy and proud that I'm able to work in such a fantastic industry. So thank you very much for sharing that with me. Mary, we're going to go to you next. Would you mind talking to us a little bit about at what stage of a career can a woman in energy play the role of a mentor?
So I think a woman can play the role of a mentor at any stage of their career. It depends on who you're mentoring as well. I think mentoring or mentorship is very important. It can play a very important role in facilitating women not only entering the sector, but remaining in the sector. So I think young professionals can clearly mentor new entrants to the sector, and also those that are seeking to enter the sector. So perhaps those at university and so on. So you don't have to be at a specific stage in your career to act as a mentor. Obviously, I think those that are further on in their careers can help mentor people who are perhaps aiming to climb the ranks in terms of their career. And it's one of the things, you know, as WISE, we've got a mentorship program. And in fact, it's our first year of our mentorship program. It's our pilot program this year. And what we've done is, in this case, we're aiming at lower to mid-level women who are already in the sector, but are seeking to really, you know, grow within the sector and to facilitate that retention and promotion that I mentioned. Because one of the clear areas that we have seen is that a lot of women enter the sector, but they don't necessarily always stay in it, or they stagnate. They don't have the opportunity to progress within the sector. So what we're trying to do at this stage is to have women who are already in the sector at lower and mid levels and to mentor them. And the mentors, it's not just women, so it's not just women acting as mentors, it's men as well. The mentors have to have at least 10 years professional experience and to also be within, in this case, the clean energy sector, so not just the energy sector, because it is for WISE. But I think, you know, that's because we're targeting a specific experience of women. So we need to have that same or that experience reflective of that in terms of the mentors. But can we have younger mentors? Absolutely. Everyone can be a mentor at a different degree. And I do think that mentorship is important. It's not a panacea, because one of the issues, I suppose, with mentorship is that it's only as good as the people we reach in a way. And I would like to hope that those that are mentees today in the future will act as mentors, and hopefully will, you know, some of that knowledge transfer, some of that experience that they've learned through the mentorship program, hopefully can then be transferred. And it doesn't always have to be in a formal program. But obviously, I think mentorship and mentorship programs have an important role in facilitating women in the sector, in the energy sector. But it's just part of one of the many things that I think we need to work towards, and all the different things that we're discussing today. But mentorship is one of those sort of cogs in the wheel that we need to make sure is there. And I think, as I said, perhaps we all have that incumbent duty upon ourselves as well to act as mentors, whether it's in a formal program or just on a day-to-day basis with those that are around us.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for your insightful, your insights and your advice. I think mentorship is extremely important in regards to really entering the sector as well. So thank you very much, Mary. Shada, would you mind talking to us a little bit about what would your advice be for women who are just starting out their careers?
Yeah, sure. I think I really enjoyed listening to Christine and kind of some of her advice and her insights on her career so far. I think there are a lot of things there that young professionals and young women can take into consideration. I think that the advice that I also got when I was first starting out my career still stands true today. And that is to focus a lot more on gaining skills and building capacities that are relevant for leadership much earlier on. I think that by focusing on your growth and focusing on gaining some of those skills and having that growth mindset, rather than thinking, you know, or being fixed in a position when it comes to your skills and when it comes to your talents and thinking that you lack in a certain area or so, focus on practice. I think practice makes perfect. And I think the more we practice, the more you get better at it. I think that no matter how excellent a person can be at what they do and at their job, if they're not able to manage expectations of those around them, those they have to deal with, if they're not able to have and hold difficult conversations, then they wouldn't really get that far up the ladder. So I think that would be my first point, and I think that I would really stress that. I'd also like to say from my personal experience that perhaps you shouldn't be so afraid of exploring your options. You know, I think a lot of young professionals feel the need to have everything figured out. You know, they feel the need to have a specific plan of where they want to be with their career growth. I think that as long as you have a clear vision and maybe a goal that you would like to achieve, then always feel free to pivot and change your strategy along the way. As long as you get there, you can really, doesn't matter how the steps play out. You should always be reinventing, learning and growing in different fields and different opportunities. And finally, I'd echo what Mary said, and I'd say to get a mentor yourself.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Mary, would you mind talking to us a little bit about what do you perceive as the greatest challenge for women already in the energy sector?
Okay, so for women in the sector, already in the sector, we often see references to the 3 E's, or the need for the 3 E's in terms of equal opportunity, equal pay and equal leadership. I think I'd probably add to that education as well, another E, because I think that's fundamental. Even for those already in the sector, but also for those who want to enter the sector, it's obviously fundamental. For those in the sector, I mentioned already maintaining and progression. So we need to increase but also maintain participation of women in the sector, because I think that's a key challenge. And we also need to facilitate progression of women in the sector, because I think there is a real risk that even where we can maintain participation, that participation doesn't always lead to progression. And that sort of brings me back to sort of the education and training point as well. I would say also that employment and workplace regulations and policies, those are also important in things like consideration of policies that are to facilitate closing wage gaps, things like paid parental leave, and also policies in place to ensure that women can take those steps towards leadership as well. So again, sort of going back to facilitating that progression. And perhaps specific, I think, to of all sectors really that we look at, the energy sector in a way, I think there are a lot of cultural and social biases and perceptions of the roles of women. And so I think some of those cultural and social norms that do lead to barriers, not just to entry to the sector, but once you are in the sector, to progression within the sector. I think those are challenges. And I think one of the things that's important, of course, to bear in mind, and we've touched on this already, is that although, you know, in the energy sector, we're looking at between sort of 20 to 30% roughly participation, depending on the energy subsector, more in renewables as we've discussed. But although we have that percentage participation, we need to sort of delve down into those numbers. And we're seeing that women are so underrepresented, particularly in sort of engineering, the technical side of the sector, and also in the senior levels of the sector in terms of management. And those two areas in particular, I think it's important to bear in mind that, you know, when you look at those statistics, it's no longer going to be 20 to 30%. That's going to drop probably quite dramatically. And so I think, you know, go back to the education point and STEM, of course, where, you know, we really need to encourage that participation, you know, even before entry to the sector, but participation in STEM, obviously, at a school level, right through to university. And then once those that are in the sector are already participating in the sector, to ensure that there's that sort of education and ongoing participation within the sector. I think in terms of STEM, quite often, what I see in a lot of the energy companies is that a lot of engineers ultimately end up sort of taking more a finance route as well and get more involved in the management. And so they progress their careers that way. But of course, that also means that those positions are mostly held by men. So that's why I think we have to go back to some of the roots as well. So for those in the sector, it's extremely important to look at maintaining their presence in the sector and progressing it. But I think we also need to take a sort of step back as well in terms of where women are entering the sector and what subsectors of the energy sector that they're entering.
Great, thank you very much. That was great. I like the way that you talked about retaining, you know, the talent pool as well. I think that's extremely important. I think that there's a way, you know, I was told once the reason that women don't apply to the energy sector is because, you know, we always have a tendency of checking every single box, making sure that we meet all the requirements also. Another reason was that women are not applying because these jobs are seen as, you know, male-dominated jobs. However, I think that there's a language that can be used to actually attract every single person to apply for jobs. So I think that there's different languages that we can use in a job description as well for the retainership. But that was great. Thank you very much, Mary. Christine, would you mind talking about the systematic nature of the problem and why is it so important to tackle the barriers for women in energy?
So first of all, I need to manage my mic and unmute it. Yeah, I'll go to that, but I would just like to add to what Chada has said before, because I think she also mentioned a really important point, and this is when she said you have to be flexible. I see lots of young women, or men as well, by the way, who have a very clear plan in mind and they want to do this and this and this. I mean, when I look back at my career now, it looks very planned out, but it was not planned at all like this. And I would say the key to success is to seize the opportunity. everybody gets opportunities presented in life, be it different job options, meeting different people, and you can either seize it or you don't seize it. I mean, there is no obligation, of course, but it really helps to be open to this. And so I started in the regional energy agency, then went to Brussels, worked for the European renewables industry, and then went to a global network promoting renewables with governments, international organizations, NGOs, and industry. It was not planned like this. It just one step opened the next. And I think this is really, really important. On the systemic nature of the problem, well, I think it starts very early on. It is that, unfortunately, in many societies nowadays, we still have the bias that the technical jobs, the STEM jobs, they are more for the boys, and the other, be it policy or sales, or are more for the girls. And it starts very early on. And I think we cannot be outspoken enough early on in showing young people the possibilities. It's very clear that energy does not only mean technical jobs, it requires a whole set of skills. And this is important, and it requires role models. It requires them seeing that women succeed in this field, be it as heads of companies or as founders of companies or whatsoever. And I think that's what I mean by the systemic nature of the problem is really that the energy sector is perceived as very technical. So immediately men dominated, and it starts very early on, of course, in education. And so I think that we need to work on curricula of schools, but also universities, where we need to include these layers of possibilities, and also show girls and young women the possibilities that this sector brings about. And I think one cannot start early enough, because I just see also that the gender bias starts very, very early on. I have a young daughter, and it's really difficult to buy neither pink nor light blue clothes. I mean, it all comes in these stereotypes right from the early stages on. And I find that really a pity. And it starts early on, that it's not that the daughters only play with the dolls and the boys with the tractors, but that you can actually mix all of these. And I think it's getting better, but still, at the end of the day, at least in my part of the world, it's still quite gender bias, and I think this is important to be overcome. And then, of course, when it comes to policies in the workplace, there is a need to also, and there are lots of possibilities to foster equality, workplace policies allowing people to combine family life and jobs, that allow them to combine childcare and career opportunities. So there are measures out there, but they're not yet taken up by all of the companies. But we see, and I think more and more family-friendly or work-life-friendly policies are getting a plus for any employer to find good employees, because at the end of the day, happy employees are the ones performing better, and then are definitely also better for the company.
Great. Thank you very much. What we'll do, because we have 9 more minutes left, I'm actually going to open the Q&A to the panelists. So we do have some questions from the audience, and this question will go to Mary, Christine, and Shada as well. So in your opinion, how do we go about improving gender diversity? Maybe we can start with you, Shada.
Yeah, it's a very good question and a very key question, I think. Just in line with what Christine and Mary were mentioning earlier about education, I do believe that it starts very early on, as Christine mentioned as well. I think it's more about encouraging young people, men and women, girls and boys, to make decisions related to areas that they are curious about, that they're inspired by, and they're interested in. And again, kind of more in line with what I was discussing earlier about having that growth mindset and realizing that, you shouldn't be constrained or limited by that box that you're in, by your existing skills or your existing interests as well. I think exploring is the first thing that people need to be aware of and need to understand. And that's really the first step in destroying those self-limiting beliefs that we may have that kind of keep us in those boxes. But again, from a policy-making point of view, from an organizational point of view, and so on, then yeah, we do need to be very vigilant and actively pursue removing any unconscious bias, any systematic bias that we may have, and that can really influence decision-making. I think that we need to take a closer look at processes, at controls, and at decision makers themselves to make sure that they're aligning to the values that we believe in as a society and as communities. But again, we need to be very aware of and acknowledge the fact that this is a continuously evolving process. There's always continual improvement, and as much as we as governments, organizations, and teams try to align to some of the good practice out there, then there's always room for us to lead and lead with more best practices. So that would be my 2 cents on this.
Great, thank you very much. Mary, what can we do to improve gender diversity?
Yeah, so I'd echo a lot of what Shada said, but education, of course, is extremely important. If we're looking at a sort of workplace in terms of a professional environment, one of the things I think that's also key is to make sure that it's something that we're all responsible for, and by that I mean both men and women, because one of the things I do each year is I'll organize an event around International Women's Day, and quite often I get the response from my male colleagues, oh, but it's Women's Day, it's just for the women. And I'm, no, this is for everyone. We're not here, women, to preach to women. This is to, celebrate women, of course, in terms of International Women's Day, but in terms of looking at gender diversity and D&I, diversity inclusion generally as well. It's something that we all have a duty to promote. And so, yes, we have to start from the bottom up, essentially, and also from the top down. So we have to do both ways, because education is absolutely fundamental, but we also need the buy-in. And I don't just mean, talking the talk. We actually need to put those words into action. A lot of companies have quite strong policies. Sometimes we don't see enough coming out of those policies. Sometimes it's a bit too many words and not enough action. So I think we need to see more actual buy-in to those. But as I said, it has to come from all of us, men and women. And I'm pleased that I do have some male colleagues who are very sort of forthright and strong in that respect. And perhaps it's a coincidence, but it tends to be the men with daughters, I think, who have more of awareness of the issues that can arise. But if that's what it takes, that's fine by me, because we need everyone's buy-in.
Thank you very much. And Christine, what are your thoughts?
I agree on both what Shada and Mary have said. I would add to all of this, I think we need also we need quotas and targets. I don't think that having it is all only voluntarily, it will happen, but it will take far too long to put equality in place. I think that governments and also companies need to be held accountable for improving gender equality. And I really loved when your Joanna, your prime minister was asked when he presented his cabinet with 50-50 men and women. He was asked how come, and he said, well, we are in the 21st century. We need more leaders with this mindset. And until this is happening, I think a bit of obligation will help to accelerate the transition towards more equality.
Thank you very much. I have another question here, and this is for anyone to answer. My daughter is at the stage of applying for her first university co-op position in environmental engineering. She has been reaching out to women and others in the field Is there any advice you can give in terms of her cover letters or approach that may open that key first opportunity? So this, whoever would like to answer, that'd be wonderful. Perhaps Shada, you may have some insight regarding the cover letter and applications.
I would say to not just limit it to your qualifications and your university programs or whatever you've done from an educational point of view, but to really explain why you're passionate about this specific opportunity. I see that a lot of people kind of take this idea of putting together cover letters and CVs as something that you do just to get the point across about what you've done, but you really need to sell yourself, sell that you are the perfect person and the perfect fit for that opportunity. So yeah, I would say since she doesn't have a lot of experience and so on to build on, then I would say to say why she's special and what makes her more passionate than the next candidate.
Thank you very much for that advice. Any last comments from the panelists that they would like to add before we start wrapping up? Mary and Christine and Shada, we would love to hear any of your closing comments. Perhaps we'll start with Christine.
Okay, thanks, Joanna. Well, I will reiterate what I said earlier. Look for your passion. Look what really makes you passionate. If it's the energy sector, great. If it's another field, find it and then start your career in this field or continue your career in this field and seize the opportunities that are presenting themselves along the way. Look for role models, look for mentors. It's always easier not to go a journey alone, but to get some support. It's out there, and also connect to the many networks, because we are all not working in isolation, but we work in a multifaceted environment, and these networks really help to extend your circle. But then also that might present opportunities for the next job for you to come. So don't be shy. Go out and network.
Thank you very much, Mary.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for all the insights this afternoon and morning in some cases. The energy sector, yes, it really has the ability to provide so many different opportunities across the entire energy value chain for women and of course for men. And yes, there's a clear gender gap there at the moment, but that's something that is slowly closing. And I think in terms of the energy transition, in terms of clean energy and renewables, that gap is a lot less. And that is a clear opportunity I think we need to grasp. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen without us positively taking action to encourage women's participation, whether it's through formal policies or whether it's through making sure that we have, more integrated discussions between stakeholders to promote the role of women and the retention and promotion of women once they're in the sector.
Thank you very much, Mary and Shada.
Yeah, I would also like to add that we all need some professional advice and support and help. And I think mentorship programs work just as well for both men and women. I know that there are a lot of great programs out there, some that maybe Mary mentioned. The Powerful Connections by the Powerful Women Initiative is another good one. There is Lean in Energy, and there are a lot of great ones that people can have access to. And just my last thought would be that for you to be a great mentor, you really need to have a mentor first.
Well said. Well, I want to thank each and every single one of you. You definitely are leaders. You guys are not only sponsors, but champions. And I want to thank again Energy and Utilities in partnership with WIRE, Women in Renewable Energy, Global Women's Network for the Energy Transition, and Women in Clean Energy and Clean Energy Business Council for taking part in this. Thank you so much. I know we had further questions. And again, this is a continuing discussion, but again, thank you to all for partaking. We had a great discussion, and I wish every single one of you the best of luck and to continue the important message. Take good care.
Thanks for your moderation, Joanna. Well, very well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.